Now we're good to go.
Now
Okay. So today we're talking about overwhelm. Well, technically Susan's talking about overwhelm today, which is in a perfect thing for us as well. I can't wait to hear, why you guys are motivated to spend your summer nights with us here about this one. But Susan is in the middle of a giant move across the country. She's going back into the tundra of Canada. I have a different background. I don't know if you're, I'm up in Stamford, Connecticut, and we are emptying a 2-bedroom condo that we've lived in for 15 years to figure out what was going to come to our next country and what is not. So it's been chaos here as well. And so overwhelm just seems to be the theme of the day. Who else is overwhelmed and wants to share?
That was going to be my first question.
So sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder, Susan.
You never do, girl. You never do. I like the mind meld. That's good.
That's right. That's right. So Terry, what's going on in your world right now?
I am not overwhelmed.
Excellent.
For once, I am not overwhelmed. Lots of changes going on at work, but I'm breathing through them. So
okay. All right. We'll have to hear more about those changes during roundtable, right? So that's awesome. All right. Yeah. And Nate, are you in listen only mode? I'm assuming you are, unless you decide to come off of mute. So Christina, good to see you. So, all right. So I'm going to hand it off to Susan. I'm going to co-pilot, I think, the video. So you let me know when you are ready to go. And we're going to talk about how to really stay calm and focused when everything around you is going to shit. So turning it over to you, Susan.
Thanks, Tammy. Yeah, I was just sharing with Tammy that today is a perfect day for this topic, because we're not just talking about overwhelm, for recession-proofing your career, but we're talking about overwhelm in general. So I am moving way north, and in the process of buying a house. And mortgage is approved, everything, all the conditions are supposed to come off tomorrow. And today I found out there's mold. So that pushed me into overwhelm about an hour ago. So you get me in overwhelm.
Well, we certainly respect you for being here then.
Oh, thank you.
A true sign of a professional is when you can show up and do what's needed no matter what else is going on. So you meet the criteria for high-class professional today.
Aw, thank you. You're making me blush, actually. That's good. You know what? And this is what I do to handle overwhelm. So, I've got my notes, and, I'll follow them a bit and stuff like that, just to make sure that I don't miss anything. But overwhelm, I've experienced, many, many times in my career and my life. I actually call it the conundrum phase. And it's just, you get to a point where it's like, what do you handle first? What's next? Where do I focus? And, so my terminology is conundrum, but we'll see if you like that one, or just call it overwhelm. It's up to you. But first and foremost, we've got to recognize that when you're in overwhelm, for whatever reason, it is kind of like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But how do you do that, right? Eating an elephant one bite at a time, still, every time you take a bite, you're still taking a look, and this is gross, I know, but you're still taking a look at this big elephant that you still have to consume all of. So we're going to talk about some strategies on how to conquer that as much as possible. And feel free to chime in if you have more strategies, things that work for you. These are really what work for me. And funny enough, I had a client call me today, just while I was literally in between calls from the mortgage specialist and the inspector, crying, and she's in complete overwhelm. So I had to, kind of talk her off the ledge, and start engaging her in, asking her certain questions, and started walking her through this. So it's already been put in practice today once, and it will be put in practice at least by me after this. So
I take it the interview didn't go well.
It wasn't actually an interview. No, sorry, different client.
Okay, good. I was afraid. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, no.
Okay, good.
No, she said the interviews went really, really well, and yeah, her fingers are crossed.
Good. Excellent. Okay, great.
Who's circling my legs here? Okay, so typically when we're in overwhelm, there's something called the fearsome four that show up in our world. we start to question ourselves, right? First one is the inner critic. So it's about your self-image. You start thinking, like, I'm not good at this, or I'm a so-and-so, so there's something wrong with me. I'm different, and not in a good way. We all have this inner critic. It doesn't matter who you are and how self-confident you are in your career or in your life. Inner critic will always kind of creep in. The second fearsome four is the imposter syndrome. Now, essentially, the imposter syndrome is just the perception, what you feel the perception of others is. But it's really not. It's your own perception. You start thinking like, I'm a fraud. I don't belong. Everybody's going to find out that I actually don't know what the hell I'm doing. And I remember it well. Early in my career, I'd just been in management for a year and a half. I was in recruitment management. I'm sorry if some of you have heard this story before, but I was hired to be an HR manager. I had no background in HR. I'd just been in recruitment for several years, a year and a half as a recruitment manager. Now I worked in an HR team, but again, no experience. And this organization hired me to be their head of HR, moved me across the country, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was getting my Google on, I was talking to some friends, and I was visiting my parents at the time when the offer came in, and I was beside myself. I was like, oh boy, I was totally in that fraud, imposter syndrome mode. And my dad looked at me and said, Susan, they wouldn't have offered you the job if they didn't believe you could do it. So you need to believe them when they say you can do the job. Like, they're not going to move you across the country. They're not going to put you in charge of a growing technology startup if they didn't think you could do it. And those words of wisdom have, stayed with me for 25 years. And I always have to go back to that whenever I'm feeling like an imposter is, believe them when they tell you you're great, because you really are. The third one is the low self-confidence. We all go through it. Some of us go through it in different ways. Some of us, I've worked very hard to overcome it. I grew up with a mother who still has no confidence in her own abilities, even though everybody loved her, everybody counted on her. So I had to fight really, really hard for myself on, having low self-confidence. And even though my confidence is much, much stronger now, there's always that little trickle every once in a while, especially when you're comparing yourself to others. That's where you just need to stop because you are unique, you're beautiful, you're wonderful, you're intelligent, just the way you are. And you're not the other person. You never will be. And that's okay, because you're uniquely you. You are smart enough, you are brave enough. And so just, taking a look at that low self-esteem, and we'll talk about some strategies around all of this. And the last one is the second guessing. How many of you guys have said, oh, I should have done this, could have, should have, would have? We all say that. It's hindsight. We all wish that we came out of that meeting and we said something different. I don't know about you guys, but there's many times I've gotten into my car and I've been driving home and going, oh, I wish I would have said that. Oh, oh, that would have been perfect. And typically I'll follow up with a email or a follow-up there. But sometimes when you're in the moment, you start second guessing yourself. And those fearsome fours, when they show up, you really do need to stop. Okay, and we're going to get into some of the fighting the fearsome four. But before we do that, I want you to write down the four I just talked about. Okay, so hopefully you have a piece of paper and a pen. I want you to write down inner critic, imposter syndrome, low self-confidence, and second guessing. And then I want you to think about, in your times of overwhelm, where are you at? Where do you show up? Is it in one area? Is it in all four? And I don't need you to share that with anybody else, but I just want you to think about those four items, because when we're talking about how to overcome them, hopefully you'll see yourself and you can apply that to those specific areas. Just give you a second here while I take a sip. It's Coke Zero, by the way. It is not a beer. I promise you. I just like a cold drink. Okay, so we're going to talk about fighting the fearsome four. And the first thing I want you to do is just, when you're in any one of those spots, is just stop what you're doing, literally. I remember having some wicked negative self-talk, and I was walking to the subway for work, and I literally stopped myself in the middle of the street, and I had a good talking to myself. Well, luckily there was no cars coming because I was literally standing in the middle of the street. But I actually had to stop and acknowledge that, stop having that conversation. You're only putting yourself down. And so I want you to, wherever you're at, just stop what you're doing and breathe. Repeat. Then I want you to repeat what you told yourself. If you hear it back and if you say it out loud, you'll be amazed at how you're going to think, why was I thinking that? Boy, did that sound stupid. Like, I don't feel that way. But if you repeat it out loud, it's got a good, what's the word I'm looking for? It's an aha moment, typically, at least for me. Then I want you to challenge the thought. Is there any evidence? Or is it just your interpretation? So why am I thinking this way? You're going to put things into perspective. Ask yourself, how likely is this to happen? How likely is this organization going to see you as a fraud? Or how likely are they to give you a chance because they know you don't have the experience, but they believed in you? So put things into perspective and say something positive to yourself that counteracts that. Okay. So if you're thinking that, what, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I just said that, or I just did that, saying, you know what, that was just my thought. That was just, there's no big deal. Everybody makes mistakes. It really isn't a big deal. Most of the time, people aren't probably paying attention anyways. It's kind of like that zit on your face. When you go, oh my God, it's huge and nobody else can see it. So say something positive to yourself to counter the negative. That'll really help you. And then give yourself a break. We already talked about that. You're only human. What other tactics might you use when you have to fight negativity? Well, you can come off of chat, you can plunk them in the chat, but what are some of the tactics that you would use to fight negativity?
Something I've learned recently is that my thoughts are not facts. And so when I have thoughts, inner critic, whatever it is, my second brain, my response to that with, you know what, that may be my thoughts, opinion, but they're not facts. So I can choose what I believe. I'm not forced to believe my thoughts.
Absolutely. And if you can have that dialogue with yourself every time, make that a habit, it's very powerful. Anybody else have a tactic? I've got a puppy who's just about to start barking, so I'm holding her snout right now. I apologize. Luna, lay down. No one else? Okay, so then let's
hang on. I think Carrie was going to say something, and Chris came off of mute.
Well, I was thinking about it, but I noticed that a couple of them usually tend to hit together, like they snowball, right? But usually it is either it's stopping to think about it and just kind of stepping away from it, right? So removing myself from it, thinking about something else, because that gives me the clarity of mind to let reality sink in and then let those other pieces that you spoke about kind of happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's getting outside of your own body almost, right? It's that out of body experience in the end. It's really, even looking yourself in the mirror. Or, if you're alone and don't, whatever, turn on your own Zoom or your Facebook or FaceTime and start having a conversation with yourself. Talk yourself out of it. That way, at least there's an audience, right? I've done that. I'm not kidding. I'm not. I think I may have done it this week. Maybe it was last week, but I know I've done it recently. So
Hey, it works. So
it does. You know, I can talk to the dog all I want, but all she's going to do is lick my face. So that's not any help. It's good loving, but it's not any help. So anybody else have any tactics that you use?
Christina.
Sometimes I need to talk it over with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't get the right perspective in my head, even after trying some of those other things, because they'll have other ideas or just a different perspective. And if I trust them, then I'm going to believe what they have to say to me. And so that helps me sometimes. Another thing is to remember another time I was doing this kind of, I call it spinning. When I was doing this kind of spinning.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what I did then to counter it, you know, what was successful, what helped me, so that I can, because I've been working on some of this and trying to develop different habits when it happens, different responses instead of my knee jerk, which is not very useful. And so that's another thing that I do. But I think you're like right on point. You have to challenge it. And I think you have to challenge it in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't have the answer, you know, you have to challenge it. And then, you know, just keep thinking on it if you need to come up with the answer or get with a trusted advisor.
Mm-hmm. Particularly, I find that having that trusted advisor, and we'll talk about them. We'll a short video on that shortly. It's especially when you are looking to change careers or you're worried about your job, you're worried about the recession or whatever, is having that conversation with somebody who will, you know, calm you down, who will show you the reality, who will, you know, stop you from hyperventilating. I call it talking you off the ledge. I talk people off the ledge all the time, and sometimes they've got to talk me off the ledge, right? And it's important because there's so much that life is throwing at us right now. I mean, you know, just with my story, and that's just one aspect of my life right now. There's other aspects I still have to balance, like work, you know. That's a fun part too. But yeah, thank you, Christine. Thanks everybody for you know, your input. And
I'll wrap up, Susan, before we move on.
Yeah.
You know, there's two things that work for me. Especially back when I was in corporate, I would keep a data girl file. So when I got those emails that, you know, like, you're a rock star, we can't live without you, I would put them somewhere, because when I felt like a schmuck, I need to go back and read those and remind myself that I'm not the schmuck I think I am, at least not all the time. You know, so I thought that was, you know, that was always helpful for me to just kind of get that quick burst of attitude adjustment. But I think that the second thing that's even more powerful for me is perspective, because we tend to make things way more important than they are. Everything is life or death, fight or flight. And the reality is the majority of us are not saving lives or curing cancer. And so, you know, while mold is terrible, right? And I get the overwhelm with that, you know, from a perspective, it's like, it can be handled. You know, it's not on your time, it's not what you expected, but there's a way to deal with that. And when we have that perspective of, okay, let's just put this where it belongs versus, okay, the world is going to end tomorrow if this isn't the way it needs to be, for me helps, because I do tend to be very dramatic. You know, shut up, Christina. And
we're all nodding.
You know, if I'm dramatic out loud, just imagine what's going on in crazy town in my head. So, you know, so that does work for me in terms of perspective when things just spin, because I'm a big spinner too. So hopefully that helps.
Absolutely. I like your, yeah. What do you call it? Your Atta Girl?
Atta Girl file. Yeah.
Atta Girl file. Yeah. Yeah. I think that one of the tactics that I use, especially when interviewing or when having that imposter syndrome thing, is I take a look at my old performance reviews. And I actually love interviewing because I get to talk about all the cool stuff that I've done, and which helps me to forget about all that negativity in my head. So I use it as a strategy interviewing, actually, just to feel good about myself. So there's another tactic. There's another little story, and there's a few more tactics that I want to talk to you about. One is, and it's going to sound silly, but go to the bathroom. And you're wondering why. So you're in your office, you're surrounded by people, you're at a party, a networking event, whatever it looks like, and you're having a panic attack. You're having I don't feel like I belong, life is overwhelming, I can't handle this right now. If you actually just step away and go to the bathroom and just breathe and give yourself 5 minutes, 10 minutes to get out of your head and just breathe it through when nobody else is watching, because nobody's following you into the stall. At least I hope they're not following you into the stall. That's a different story. But so if you can start to utilize some of these tactics, stop in the middle of the street, go to the bathroom, whatever it looks like. I actually have one of my closest and longest friends is 11 years sober now. And one of his AA teachings was, and why I said go to the bathroom, was when he was in overwhelm because he wasn't sure whether he could stay sober. His sponsor told him to buy a case of water and drink a bottle of water every hour. You're going to have to pee a lot. And if you drink a bottle of water every hour and you have to go to the bathroom every hour, you have time to, for him, it was to recite, God give me the strength. But for you, it may be something else. So that's a bit of an extreme, depending on, and that's where if you're in a really overwhelming conundrum, but it's a tactic. It's kind of a silly one, but there you go. The other thing you need to start doing is appreciate your unconditional worth. Chances are, if you're in overwhelm, you haven't actually taken the time to acknowledge your intrinsic value. Okay. If you're performance oriented, you may believe your worth is tied to that big paycheck, to those bonuses, to how much you can accomplish and stuff like that. But it's an unhealthy perspective. It'll leave you feeling overwhelmed and frustrated because you're tied to one thing. So look back and take a look at all that you're worth, all the intrinsic value that you have. Phone a friend or three, to Christina's point, that will help talk you off that ledge and help share what your worth is. Very much like I use my interviewing skills. That really, really helps. There's been many times where I've had to do a bio, and I had to do a bio for Career Winner Circle, and I had many bios and stuff like that, but I wasn't feeling it. So that's the first thing I did was actually, and Tammy can tell you, it's like, I don't know what to say. Yes, I have 5 or 6 of these already rewritten, but I don't know what I want to say now. So I actually put an email out to all my, my closest friends and said, what do you think are my greatest skills, my biggest value that I bring? And that really helps. So phone a friend or 3. And then the next one is we're going to share the quick video, and that's getting it all out of your head. Okay. And Terry, I think you're the one that said, you just have to step away, right? It's that outer body experience. So Tim, if you want to kind of share the video, please.
Yep, you got
Thank
it.
you.
How to find it. There it is. You know how I am with screen sharing. It's always a challenge every week. Let's see. And go.
If you feel overwhelmed, if you feel like the world is coming at you, if you feel like you're spinning a million plates and juggling a million things right now, and you're starting to get concerned because you're dropping balls and you can't figure out what you should focus on first, this video is for you. I woke up today totally overwhelmed. I got really emotional on a team call because I feel like I'm dropping a million balls right now. This morning, there were a bunch of emails that people had sent me. Hey, did you forget about this? Hey, could you get back to me on this? I got a couple text messages from very close friends of mine that I had promised blurbs to for their books. And I said I would do it. I didn't do it because I'm not organized right now. I'm just dropping balls. I'm overwhelmed. So my husband, Chris, came into the kitchen where I'm working at that table back there, and had everything spread out, just stuff everywhere. He sat down with a piece of paper and he forced me to spend an hour with him basically doing what I call a brain dump, where you dump everything out on paper. But this particular brain dump had a unique structure to it. I want to share it with you because I want you to partner up with somebody in person or virtual and do this for each other. So he took out a blank piece of paper. He had me open up my email and my calendar and go email by email by email and walk him through one project at a time, what needed to get done. And then he would ask me follow-up questions. And when would you need to start that? And what help do you need with this? And is there anything else? And what else needs to happen? And he just wrote everything down. As we kept going, if there was anything on the list that could be done in a minute, send an email, quickly make the phone call, we just knocked it off. And then we kept going. And as I would bring a sense of urgency to some task, he would say, well, wait a minute, is this actually a priority today, or can we schedule it for tomorrow? Is this a priority that we could do for next week? Having an objective third party write it all down for you, ask you these questions, it was liberating. Absolutely liberating, because half the stuff I've been panicked about, I don't even need to work on until Monday. What happens when things start to stack up is everything starts to feel urgent. And because you're the one that's starting to feel buried alive underneath all this stuff, it's very, very hard for you to be objective about getting yourself organized again. But having an objective third party there, game changing. Actually, let's go talk to Chris. Let's talk to Chris and see. Chris, can I ask you a question? He's probably annoyed. I was just talking about how transformative that was that you did with me. See this list that he's got right there? And what would you recommend if other people were doing it? I just said you got to show up with a blank piece of paper. You ask the other person to go, well, why don't you tell us the steps? Can you tell us the steps that you just did with me?
The only thing I didn't have other than a pad of paper and a pen was handcuffs. That would have been useful.
Why? Would you say that?
I think other than a pad of paper and a pen, it took extreme discipline to just listen and wait and listen and wait, be patient and listen, and just keep trying to keep you on task from email to email, just so that you can get it out. I don't know. I don't relate to it like rocket science. The hardest part is actually just
Sitting down with somebody and asking for help?
yeah, and putting up with whatever they need to do or process or be anxious about, and bite your lip and just keep going. I'm glad you found it helpful.
Extremely helpful.
Thanks, Terry.
Bet.
What's that?
I said, you bet. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. I really liked this video. You know, I can just regurgitate all this stuff, but different things work for different people. But I do highly, highly recommend you take a moment and write down a list of friends or loved ones that will actually spend that time with you when you're in overwhelm, and have that patience with you and tell you like it is when you need to hear it. Not a yes person or whatever, but somebody who has that ability. And maybe it's more than one person. We all get different things from different people in our world, right? So depending on what the topic is, find that person so that you can get it out of your head, write it down. And we'll talk more about that at the end, about kind of my strategy for how to write it down and how to make it a strategy and prioritize. So there's a few categories I want you to, pen and paper again, if you will, please. write down so that you can do a brain dump when overwhelm hits. Number one is thoughts that are holding you back. Perceived barriers at work, perceived barriers at home, and your mounting to-do list. So when you need to do a brain dump, those are 4 categories that you can focus on, right? Because we all have a to-do list that's, I mean, let's face it, I think I only ever got 1 or 2 things on my to-do list done a day. The list just kept growing pages and pages long, which can be crazy. Luckily, I had an amazing executive coordinator who kept me on track. I don't have her anymore, so wish I did. But those are kind of the 4 areas that you can focus on when you're doing a brain dump, at least to start guiding you. There's others, of course, but it's just to give you a start.
I love that, Susan. And I would love to give a bonus one, just to add. The one that works for me is things I can control.
Absolutely. So that was my point number 4.
Mm-hmm.
Mind meld happening again.
Yeah.
Identify what's within your control to change. Right? I mean, I like control. Very independent woman here. I like to have control of my world. Of course, life isn't like that. So reminding myself of what I can and can't control is not always easy, because I do think I can change things. I love change. I'm a change expert, personally and professionally, but it's not always within my control. So what parts of the thing that I want to change are in my control, and can I take steps in that way?
Mm-hmm. And I also think too, with so much just negativity and fear mongering and background noise and drama and, the sky is falling, it's really easy to have all of those things just sitting on you like a brick.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was having a conversation with a very good friend and colleague, and it was right after Roe v. Wade got overturned, and she was out of her ever loving mind. For good reason. I think almost all the women, or at least many of them are. And, but long story short, she was paralyzed by it. Like she couldn't think, she couldn't work, she couldn't, she was just stuck. And as, whatever way you believe, for her, this was a horrible outcome. And it was just so climactic. It just shut her down. When the reality is there's nothing you can do to control this other than vote. Right. And so putting things in perspective, or if you want to take dire measures, leave the country. She's like, oh no, I'm not willing to do that yet. I'm like, oh, okay, then. So but so don't let the things that you can't control, because what happened is when she got spun up about that, everything else felt so much more overwhelming. Right. And so that's why I think figuring out, okay, this sucks. I'm angry, but I can't control this right now. And it's impacting all the things that I can't control. So just for what it's worth.
No, and actually there's terminology that I'd like to put around that so that people remember. If you can't change it, then you have to radically accept that you can't change it. And what I mean by radically is it doesn't mean throwing in the towel. It just means allow for the uncertainty, the uncontrollability. Figure without struggle or complaint, what you're dwelling on, that's just life. There's things you can control and you can't control. And very much to Tammy's, story there, her client had to radically, accept the fact that she cannot change what they voted on and what the changes were. So she's got to move forward. The other thing you can do is stop multitasking. I have a hard time saying this one because I know all the research shows that multitasking actually doesn't work, that the brain really is, you can only handle 2 or 3 things at once. I'm a 20 ball at a time juggler. That actually doesn't put me in overwhelm, funny enough, unless it's a lot of negativity, unless it's a lot of, uncontrollable stuff. I can juggle 20 controllable balls. I'll put it that way. But if you're in overwhelm because you've got so much on your plate, remember that your brain is not actually meant to handle more than three things at a time. So that's where you need to make your list. And what you need to do in that list is you need to ruthlessly prioritize. Okay, you got to cut out the noise. So going back to eating an elephant. Okay, if you don't prioritize, and you're never going to get through the elephant. You just never are. So how I like to do it, and this is kind of the last kind of topic before we go into kind of group chat, and I'll answer any questions. And my way of handling a conundrum or overwhelm is I draw a circle in the middle of a page. So if you want to go ahead and do that, I want you to draw a circle in the middle of the page, and I want you to label your biggest priority, or just one big priority that you're needing to tackle with everything else going on. And then I want you to draw spokes out from that. So I'll give you a minute to do that, or a few seconds.
How many spokes?
I usually draw 10. You may not use them all, but I would draw 10.
Okay.
And then you want to put smaller circles around them. And then you need to fill them in. So it's very much like goal setting. There's SMART goals, right? What is your BHAG? What is your big, hairy, audacious goal? What is your big, hairy, audacious priority that you need to get done? And what are all the steps that you need to do to be able to get it done? One bite at a time, baby steps. And if you can identify all of those things, from each of those smaller circles, you may draw another spoke or two. But now you've made it more manageable. You're going to get to your center. You're going to get to your big priority. But how you're going to do that is taking it one small circle at a time. And you're going to create a plan to be able to accomplish each one of those circles. And then you're going to cross them off, big X, every time you get there. Right? Label them, right? Because you can't just start randomly thinking, okay, I'm going to handle this next and that next. You have to have a strategy to it. You need to make sure that, step A is before step B is before step C. But that's how I do it. Like a to-do list, a pros and cons list. For me, that doesn't work when I'm in overwhelm. It's breaking it down, and then celebrate. Every time you accomplish this one little thing, have a glass of wine, pat yourself on the back, call a friend and say, whoo, the smallest thing, it doesn't matter. Write it on, your whiteboard that you've accomplished it. I have those giant sticky notes that you can stick to a wall, and I cross it off in bright red marker. And I keep it up there because I know then I've accomplished it. And now my list of my strategies, my tasks is getting smaller and smaller, and I'm one step closer to my goal. And you can use this in anything. Yeah. That, for me, that's the biggest, what I'm going to be doing after this call.
Yeah, I need to do that for the move. That's for sure, right? Because I'm out of my mind right now. And one of the other things that works for me is clustering my tasks.
Mm-hmm.
So usually, you've got paperwork you need to deal with, you've got emails you have to do, you've got phone calls you need to make, or things you got to organize or whatever. And so I'll just okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do all the emails and get those all done, right, for that goal. And so then I get in the just kind of in the rhythm, and it just goes so much faster for me than just, I'm going to wander over here and do this, and I'm going to call this person while I'm making lunch or whatever. So I think for me to just plow through, clustering my tasks just helps me stay in the groove.
Absolutely. Yesterday it was about mortgage paperwork. It's all on my dining room table, all the different mortgage paperwork, and it was movers, because we don't know about moving dates and storage dates, and we're getting quotes from different people, and I'm having to follow up with them. And then it's insurance, right? So every place, my office is about the relocation stuff. So specifically, we're being moved by a company, and I have to input all of the data into the system to get paid for all my outputs and stuff like that. So that's what this is. My dining room table right now is my mortgage stuff. My husband's desk is this whole, well, I'm hoping he'll handle the whole mold issue, but we'll see. But yeah, so that, lots of tactics, and everybody has different ways of dealing with things. But, in summary, you need to give yourself a break. You're only human. Call a friend, let them remind you of how great you are, especially when you're having any doubts about yourself or second guessing them. Break down your, the eating of the elephant, however that looks for you, whether it's the circle and spoke diagram that I use, or whatever. Forgive yourself and really just get out of your own way. Right? I mean, we all get in our own way sometimes, and as Tammy said, it's not life or death. Right? It will, when I was having the conversation with my client today, it's like your tasks will be there tomorrow and the next day, and that's okay. You're only human. You're absolutely only human. You can take 2 days off to be with your kids. You're only human, and put away the work computer, put away the phone. You don't owe the company anything, right? I mean, you haven't taken any days off this year, so go do it. So that's my spiel. So hopefully you guys have found it helpful, but I would love to hear your feedback. I would love to, roundtable it and find out what your thinking is, and challenge me if you will. I love that. Anyone? This is where I go Bueller.
I know Michael's got something to say. He's just trying not to be the first one in. That's usually the way it goes, right, Michael?
I defer.
Is there anything we didn't talk about that you'd like to know? I mean, it's tough to do this in just a short period of time. I can teach a whole, few-hour class on all of this, and with exercise,
Right, so
all of that.
something that I'll share that's related to your get it down on paper thing. I have accidentally found in years past the unbelievable power of 3x5 note cards. When my mind is spinning, I'll sit down and as fast as I possibly can, write down every thought that comes to mind on a 3x5 card and throw it on the ground. And I feel like there's so much going through my head at these moments, and I'll get about 5, maybe 10 cards in, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm done. Okay, that's all of them. And then I look at all those 3x5 cards on the floor, pick them up, sort them, play with them, prioritize them, whatever I need for my brain to feel like I really have them captured. And inevitably, my brain says, oh, that's it? Oh, I got this. I can prioritize them. I can delegate them. I can whatever, defer, delegate. It's so handleable when they're out of my head and in front of my eyes. Makes all the difference compared to just letting them stay inside the brain where they just feel like metal balls clinging around.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say,
I use these too.
I was going to ask because I had a visual of you and those 3x5 cards and kind of throwing them on the floor, and my first thought was, and then do you stomp on them all?
Just the ones that irritate you, right? It's like
burn them a little bit, yeah.
That would have been my next reaction, right? Let me just dance around on them a little bit and get some of the frustration and the energy out around them, and then okay, I'm ready to go.
Good plan. You might even consider firing up your fireplace if you feel good about getting one done and say, screw you. Or maybe that's when you're like, you're not worth the pain. I'll get rid of you. There is also an element of throwing them on the floor where there is an element of dominance. I am above you, right? You are under my feet.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. I
Love
like that a lot.
Mm-hmm. That works for me when I'm about to have an insomnia night too. It's just like, get out of my head.
But yeah, because that's usually when it all starts, right? As soon as your head hits the pillow, all of a sudden everything's like, bang, let's come out to play right now, which is always,
Yeah.
never fun, that's for sure. So Susan, with all of these, with all this stuff going on in the economy, people being worried about their jobs. I mean, I just got a ping from one of our affiliates today who is, she's in a IT chapter in Columbus, Ohio, to support IT professionals. It's like a association. And 2 major companies in that market have had massive layoffs, one because of economy and one because of outsourcing. So they're looking to come to Career Winner Circle to help support the community. And so that kind of overwhelm in terms of, just all of this crap is going on. And even if it's not in your company, you're reading about it every day. What are some of the things that you've advised your clients on, what to focus on and what to do to kind of stay above the fray and not be sucked into the vortex of everything is falling apart?
And I think the biggest thing is to really make your value known to others. You've got to get out of your own way first. And once you've, had your water break in the bathroom and you breathe, you need to go out there and you need to show people just how valuable you are, what you can bring to the table. You need to start thinking of, what can you take on, and not the little stuff that nobody else will take on, but what kind of projects can you take on to show others? How can you get in front of, the right people to make yourself more visible? But at the same time, you need to be realistic. And if it's, the tech industry, just big announcements, huge layoffs, at least in Canada, it was all over the news. I've got several friends in the tech world and they're all panicking. And it's really that visibility, but it's also, you need to also start looking for another job. You can't just get caught with your pants down. So you really have two jobs, right? One is make yourself more visible. The other one is take care of yourself first. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, there's so much going on in the tech sector right now. We're actually may run the challenge again.
Good.
People need it, right? So
yeah.
So Terry, you might be able to dive into the live challenge. So stay tuned on that, right? Because I know you're not making any progress on the replay. I'm watching.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, some of the priorities have taken over.
100%. And it's not the same when it's a replay. So, so from that perspective, I'll keep you posted for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. But so what's on the field for you guys today? Like in terms of the changes you're looking at, the career you're in, the environment that you're in, what kind of situations are you guys dealing with in terms of overwhelm and trying to stay focused and keep your eye on the prize? Terry, you said you had some big changes coming into work.
Well, yeah, funny enough, the company that I work for is their North American HQ is in Ohio.
Surprise, surprise.
I'm in consumer goods, so they're a consumer goods company, but I am an IT project manager.
Mm-hmm.
And they've had a new CIO come in, and she is making some changes, and they're all really good changes because this company has, well, whatever. There are a lot of changes that I am very used to working with in my prior life. And I'm starting, to see filtering of it. And they are probably by the end of the year, all looking at their respective organizations and seeing how they adapt to this. Okay. So from an IT perspective, IT generally reorgs once a year, if not 18 months, right? Yeah. In general, everywhere. So I am a contractor. They have a huge contractor base. So they, odds are they would not get rid of that. Whereas I am used to the reverse. Yeah. When, reorgs happened, contractors are the first to go. They have a very different perspective here. Because it gives them, a different leverage.
Yeah, the fungibility in terms of resources. Yeah,
exactly. So, I think I'm good in that, and with my experience, I am good. But the role that I'm doing it's my fallback role.
It's mind numbing.
I can do it in my sleep. I was managing 7 huge projects, and not huge by dollars, huge by scope and complexity. And I have gotten rid of 3 of them, either by closing them or, offloading them. And now I'm able to focus on the ones that I have left, like I should have been all along, was at a stage of overwhelm. Yesterday, I actually kind of took my notebook and just screwed my head back on straight again after lunch and went through each project and said, okay, deliverables. I should have done these 6 months ago. What's for this project? What's for this project? I made my list. And yesterday afternoon, by 4 o'clock, I had the same 3 deliverables for all 4 projects in a draft stage and filed, right? So ready for their next steps. But all I needed up until then was the time and the headspace to be able to focus on it.
Yeah.
Right. But this isn't what I want to do because I know it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like in a couple of hours, I was able to knock all that out. And a lot of my peers could not have necessarily. I'm trying to figure out what's next. So I'm trying to balance what's going on in the industry and not knowing what I want to pivot into, but being able to use all the skills that I've accumulated versus the unknown, you know, versus the comfort that I'm in.
Yeah.
The mind-numbing comfort.
Yeah. And then this is an interesting opportunity for you because you're now in a position where their target state is what you're familiar with because you've seen it a million times before. And the company has not seen this before. And so how do you leverage the fact that you are an internal expert to where the new CIO wants to go?
Yes.
Because this is where you make a very big and meaningful leap.
And I don't know how
Susan does.
to make the right connections, to talk to the right people, because they are, well, this really doesn't have anything to do with it, but it does. They're French and they are very culturally, right? Blinders, right? Against change, but also against even things that are not change have a very specific negative intonation as opposed to positive, which I find very interesting, but I don't really know how to deal with it.
Yeah. So, and so it just, Susan does, I'm just going to say that one more time, you know, just in case you didn't catch me the first time, you know, but there is an art and science to navigating these environments to thrive and to accelerate. Because when there is change, there's an opportunity for growth when everyone else is hiding under their tables, hoping that they don't get picked on, right? And people don't fear change, they fear loss.
Yes.
Right. And so the reason you get pushback on change is because people feel they're going to lose something. Autonomy, power, flexibility, whatever. And so because you know where the CIO is going and you see what the opportunities are in terms of the upside, this is your opportunity to show that this is not loss. If you play the game right and become a leader without the title and hierarchy to help people see like where the CIO is going, why this is a good thing, and how they can benefit from it. Because then all of a sudden, they're not all pushback. They're like, oh, hang on a second, I think I want a piece of this action. But it does require a little finesse, and it does require doing it the right way.
Stepping out of where I am, right? Because I can't do it. I can from my role, I can only influence and get my tentacles so far.
Disagree.
Okay.
I'm going to take away the only part, right?
Okay.
Because you can influence.
Yes.
You're in a position from a technical perspective to spread as far as you damn well want because people will defer to leadership every day. I don't know how many times Susan's like, you know, where you see somebody who's just not touching it because they're afraid of it, and you take it and you've got people 2 to 3 levels above you just saying, rock star, go for it because I didn't want to touch it. People defer to leadership. Susan, you're going to say something, so I'm sorry if I cut you off.
No, that's okay. You know, building those skills and identifying, you know, how to make yourself invaluable and how to, you know, recession-proof your career, I guess. They're very similar skills as to how you pivot in your career. So you start to learn about all these things that you can do and all these influences that you can have and all these, you know, things that you can take on, your confidence builds and you start to identify areas that you're going, oh, I didn't realize that I might be good at that. And so it all kind of ties together because you're lifting yourself up by taking on the next challenge. And it really has a great mental shift, because when you're looking to pivot at the same time as all of this other stuff that you're worried about, and you're being mind-numbingly bored out of your mind, you know, we need to merge them together, and we need to take a look at how to do that skill stacking thing. That will help.
And that's kind of where I left off on the challenge.
Yeah.
Her 7 pages of skill stacking. She got too excited about that and forgot to do all the other work.
Which is great, but yeah, the other work, that's just the baseline. That's your
exactly. It's so funny. But I saw nothing but opportunity. You know, just because you know, in terms of the value, which Susan was talking about, one of the key things to do is, you know, be the person people come to for things that are important, right? You want to be that go-to person for something important. So if you can decode what the CIO wants to do from a strategy perspective and say, here's how it plays in real life, here's where it sucks, so we want to prevent that for us, and here's where we can win, then all of a sudden you've got people coming to you and it has nothing to do with your day job.
Yeah.
I can tell you, influencing skills, having an almost 30-year career in human resources and training and development and coaching, you know, HR is never seen as the decision maker. We are the influencers. We have to lead CEOs around by the nose without them knowing it, because everything that they say and do affects everybody else. And it's our job to lift up the culture and you know, help make those things match, but without them knowing it. So influencing is an absolutely key skill. And if you're an influencer, people want you at the table, no matter what your level in the organization, because they know that you'll help other people along. Right. And that's completely invaluable.
Well, now you got some things to chew on tonight, don't you?
Yep. Enough about me though. Let's have everybody else share.
Right. Yeah. All right. So Michael, what's on your playing field? I know you've got a million things going on. Anything else you want a roundtable for tonight?
No, I'm actually about to be relieved because I finished grad school in 2 little old weeks.
Yay!
That's been a 1.5 year investment.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And that'll make time for the job hunting I need to do, since my consulting engagement will be ending soon. So from the fire to the skillet, that'll have time to do it.
Good. Excellent.
Good.
And then you'll be ready to
Focusing on yourself is the toughest thing to do, right? It really is sometimes. But now that you've got the time, that's awesome. I remember doing my master's degree. Yeah.
This is my third. I'm a professional student at this point.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, no, I was.
That's right.
I'm in the rhythm.
Totally. All right. Well, hopefully you guys found some good coaching time and, you know, some good tips to stay out of overwhelm and continue to move forward even when everything else around you is falling apart or not going your way. So we will see you next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about money. So we're going to be talking about how to take a look at your financial situation to really see how much of a storm can you weather. Because at the end of the day, we can talk about all we want, but you know, we've got bills to pay and a house to make sure we have a roof over our head, and food and family to support. And so we're going to get real about cash and about priorities next week. So we're going to take a little bit of a pivot from the stuff we normally do and address the biggest concern that everyone has when the economy decides to take a little sidestep on us. So we're going to be talking about money next week. So same bat time, same bat channel. Susan, thank you very much for a great session tonight. Appreciate that. And I will see you guys all next week.
Yep. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Take care, guys. Have a good week. Bye.
Thank you.